Hey everybody, Kat here. Welcome back to the Adventure Paradox podcast. We are in our season of horses and we are talking a little bit about the adventure paradox of horses. And we have a guest returning to the show. I am so delighted to see you, Margi. Although most folks will see you as MJ Evans, which is your pen name. You're a best-selling author. We met at the Rocky Mountain Horse Expo a couple of years ago. You have written so many books, many of them about horses. I cannot do a proper introduction justice. Will you tell us more about all of the incredible achievements, all the things you've done, and also how are you and where in the world are you today?
Well, I'm sitting in my office, the home of all my book creations in Parker, well, just outside Parker, Colorado, which is southeast of Denver. And we've lived in Parker for 30 years with our 5 children and horses and dogs, standard poodles, and moved here from Oregon, where I grew up. Now, I also want one of my proudest moments was last summer when the Colorado Authors League selected me to receive the 2024 Lifetime Achievement Award.
Wow.
And I was just stunned. Now, my husband, of course, said, "Well, that just means you're old." And that is true, I am. But I like to think that maybe I've accomplished something with my writing, that maybe made a difference, a little bit of difference in the world for my readers as I try to write books that have a good message and,
Mm,
of course, are clean. But more importantly, most of them are based on horses. And I have a series of books called Horses in History. And one of those books is what we're going to talk about today, Coal
oh,
Dust and Dreams. But
oh,
horses have played such an important part in my life from the time I was born to now. I still have horses, still teach riding lessons, I still ride. Um, but I have had horses in my life since I was born.
mm,
And I was a horse girl born to a non-horse family. I had to buy my own horse with my own money when I was 13 and had to support it myself. Thank goodness for Pony Club. Being a part of that really helped me learn all the horsemanship I needed to learn.
mm,
But they've always just been a part of my life. And
mhm.
they when anything hard in my life happens, where do I go? I go to my horse.
Yeah.
I remember when I received the call that my mother had passed away, first
Mm,
thing I did was get on my thoroughbred kit and ride. And it's there that I get my comfort, my security, I could say. But, they've now done some studies about horses and humans and how our hearts release a magnetic field. And the position of the rider on the horse is just the perfect distance for that magnetic field to connect with one another. And they found that pretty soon the horse's heart rate and the rider's heart rate are in sync.
mm,
And I can feel that when I'm writing.
mm.
So that's just kind of a little bit of background about my love of horses. And since then, my writing career has spanned, 2.5 decades. I've just finished the book we're not talking about today, Silver Charm, just finished that. It's now out for editorial reviews and cover design and things like that. But it's my 25th book.
Wow.
So I've been working really hard.
Oh, Margie, I just love you and your stories. And when you talked about, the moment your mom died and getting out and just riding and that nonverbal communication and connection that those of us who are really called to horses feel.
Yes.
And we are going to get into this book, Coal Dust and Dreams, a little bit. But first, I want to touch a little bit more on some of these stories and connections around healing with horses because it is so unique. And especially the paradox of being a horse girl born to a non-horse parent. And the desire to learn and seek and learn from other horse people, this sort of apprenticeship that is to some extent lost in a lot of places. You know, I was a working student. It sounds like you had to buy your own horse at 13, but can you speak to that a little bit? And this, goes into what's going on in Coal Dust and Dreams too, and some of your other books, but just that passing it on from one horse person's perspective to the next, and then the connection with each horse we work with and what they teach us.
Uh, Well, first I have to tell you a little joke that I've learned to be true, and that is when you get four horse people in a room, you'll get five different opinions.
So good.
And so you have to realize there's so many sources of information, and some of them conflict with one another. Different
Mhm.
trainers teach you different things. But I know when I was able to get horses again after marriage and my children were old enough that I could spend the time with the horses, and I started taking dressage lessons to really focus on improving my riding.
Mhm.
And I learned little bits from every trainer I worked with. I learned, with one trainer might have one particular method, but would be open to, well, whatever's working for you and your partner, my partner
Mhm.
being my horse. And I know that we all just keep learning, keep learning. And I have some students and they're saying, so you still take riding lessons? And I say, oh, yes, I still want to learn. I still want to get better. And, that's kind of the dressage mentality too. You have to be a bit of a perfectionist to love dressage. And I definitely am when it comes to my writing and my riding.
Mm.
But with the horses, when uh, wait a minute, I just lost I'm sorry, I lost what you had asked me.
That's okay. We were talking about healing with horses, but we
Oh,
were also
yes.
talking
Okay.
about
Thank
passing it
you.
on. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Now I'm back on track.
Sure.
I worked for several years for PATH International, the Professional Association of Therapeutic
Mm.
Horsemanship.
Mhm.
And it was my job to organize the conferences that were held around the country for riding instructors to get training to work in the field of horse therapy. And in that job, I saw so many examples of the healing power of horses. I had known before I started the job that there were several programs for disabled children um, to ride and get the horse therapy, but I did not realize the vast amount of healing that takes place with different levels of human need, whether
Mm.
it's physical, emotional, spiritual, it didn't matter. The horses could heal. When I um, was first living, well, we were first moved into this house. We're not where we are. I have the horses in my backyard, and we're not far from the local high school. And I happened to know the woman who was teaching the special needs children. And these were children with severe physical ailments,
Mm.
most of whom were in wheelchairs, most of whom were nonverbal. Um, and she asked me one day if she could bring the children over to see my horses. And I said yes. And then I kind of panicked because I had this big Hanoverian show horse,
Mm.
then a darling pony jumper, and I had no idea how they would respond. And that morning arrived, and the big yellow school bus came down the road and parked in front of my house. And I'm going, oh my goodness, how is this going to go? They opened the side doors and the ramps, and the children started being lowered in their wheelchairs down my driveway toward the barn and the arena. I have an outdoor arena. And I had the children go into the sandy arena and they were lined up in their wheelchairs. Now, anybody who knows horses know that horses immediately recognize something that's different.
Mm.
I mean, put a umbrella in the arena and they can freak out. You
Hmm.
know, that's doesn't belong there. What's that doing there? Well, I thought, oh, how is this going to go? So I thought, well, I'll start with the pony. Now, he's not a little pony, he's 14 hands, Welsh pony, but I said, I'll start with him. So I brought Hardy into the arena, and his ears pricked and his nostrils flared just a bit, but he didn't panic. And I walked him to each one of those wheelchairs, and he put his muzzle down into their laps and let the children stroke the white blaze on his face. And I thought, well, that went well. So then I went back to the barn and brought out Jazz, the big 17-hand Hanoverian. And the same thing happened.
Mm.
Jazz walked up to each one of those children, put his head, that big black head, in their laps. And the children just, sometimes they had to be helped to reach up and stroke his head. And he just let them. He knew instinctively that those children needed his power and his love. And he was willing to give it to them. And he's a big dressage horse. He'd not been trained to work with as a therapy horse to work with disabled children, but he sensed the need and he was willing to offer it. So that was one experience that I had. And so then when I had the chance to work for Path, I couldn't turn it down.
Mm.
And there was one example that inspired my story, The Stallion and His Peculiar Boy. There was a boy brought to a stable who he was, I believe he was 7 or 8, but he was non-communicative, autistic, and he was brought to the stable and they put him up on the horse and he spoke his first words. I then knew that the limits for the power of horses to heal people was there were no bounds to there were no limits to that. And I saw cerebral palsy, numerous examples of people who were strengthened and healed with through horse therapy. This also applied to troubled teens. My book, In the Heart of a Mustang, is about a troubled teenager
Mm.
and the horses, how they can heal troubled teenagers and the things that they're struggling with. You've heard about the programs for prisoners, for veterans. While I was at Path, I set up the scholarship fund for wounded warriors to use to get horse therapy. So anyway, that was just the thing that struck me was the healing power of horses. And now, if you think about in history, horses in history initially, for most people, a horse was a tool,
Mm.
a source of transportation, a source of horsepower to do a job, whether it's pulling logs out of a forest or pulling farm equipment across a field. Horses had the horsepower, the strength that we didn't have. So initially, many horses were just thought of as a tool. But I like to believe that throughout history, there were even people like us
Mm.
who looked beyond just the muscle of the horse and saw the healing power of the horse.
Mm. Absolutely. Whew. I, mic drop after mic drop right there, Margie. I'm crying. I'm just blown away. And it's very interesting. I think, you were talking about always being teachable, right? Even when we've been doing this a long time, there's still more we can learn. There's still more we can learn. There's still another beautiful experience. Like horses are good all seasons of our life, from infancy until the end. I've seen horses go into homes and really serve those who might even be 100 years old. Makes me
Right.
think of this is my grandma here in the 1930s jumping a horse with no bridle. Here, I'll show you because I think you'll get a kick out of this picture. Sorry, not no bridle, no helmet, no helmet, just
Oh, yeah, I
free as
love
a
that.
bird.
I love that.
But I had this conversation with her. She had a really beautiful and incredible life. And at one point, I was asking her, like, Grandma, how did you know just intuitively to ask this question, to be sort of in this space where things kept working out for you? And she said to me, dear, I think it was the horses. And it really opened something up for me because I don't know if you've done much jumping, but I
Yes, I have.
remember when I was training as an eventer, a working student as a teenager, we would visualize the course. And so at night, you visualize it, the three strides to that one. You're looking right over to the next one. It's going to go smooth. You just visual, it's going to work. And then you're transmitting that visualization to your horse, right? I mean, there's
Uh-huh.
this whole exchange that's happening. When people drive cars, they're not visualizing how it's going to go. They're like, all right, let's see what the light is. They're not intuitively communicating with another soul. And so I'm
Right.
really, really into this idea of what was lost when we took horses out of our transportation. And then, more importantly, and I think in Coal Dust and Dreams, when we work with horses, quote, just doing the work of being with them. And I'm going to actually read something that I think is so beautiful in here that you write, because you have this young girl and her dad works in the mines. And then you have horses coming home who are injured from the mines that he's been working with. And her task is to start taking care of them. And so I'm just going to read some words from page 17. The simple act of being in the company of horses infused her young heart with a joy heretofore unknown. Intending to their well being, Beth Ann unleashed a fresh and significant purpose that breathed vitality into her existence. Can we touch on this? Because I feel like, again, it's the work, but it's also the care, the deep care and connection that comes from caring for a horse specifically for their needs. They can't put a poultice on their hoof. Could
Right.
you touch on the care?
Well, I think everybody who's had a newborn baby can know what you're talking about. There is this beautiful soul, this beautiful spirit that's been entrusted to your care that is completely helpless without you there
Mm,
to provide for them.
mhm,
That is the feeling we get whenever we are the caregiver to those humans or animals that are in need of our help. But it makes us have a purpose. Our purpose in life is to serve others,
mm,
to not only become more Christ-like in our behaviors and actions and choices, but also to serve others.
mhm,
And the others could have two legs or they could have four legs. It doesn't matter.
mm,
But we find our purpose when we're serving.
mhm,
Now, in Bethan's case, she had not really been around horses until her father brought them home for her to start helping care for them. And I learned several things writing this book. I was deep into coal mining. I say that as a joke, but I spent a year researching coal mining. And in particular, this mine where the book is set is in South Wales.
mm.
And in this mine, the horses would be lowered 2,000 feet underground, and most of them would never see the light of day again.
Oh,
If they were injured, they could be brought up for care, but basically, that's where most of them live the rest of their lives.
mm,
This book is set in the 1930s, and they didn't have electricity in the mines at that time. So you're talking about candles and oil lamps on helmets, very, very dark, dark mine. And the horses seem to have a sixth sense. Now, let me go back for a minute. The mine owners demanded care for the horses because the horses were an asset. They were an essential piece of equipment
Mm.
to haul the coal from the coal face, which could be a couple miles in,
Mm-hmm.
bring it back to the base of the pit where it would, the tram holding the coal would be hauled up. The horse would stay down.
Gosh.
Well, but I learned while the mine owners might just view the horses as a necessary piece of equipment, the hauliers, the
Mm-hmm.
men who worked with the horses themselves, and I say men because in the UK in 1842, it was made against the law for children or women to work underground.
Mm.
Now that still happened. And in the book, I don't want to spoil the story, but in the book that still happens. But the men that worked with the horses were called hauliers, and they would learn, they would become partners with their horse. They
Mm.
learned to love their companion. And not only that, but there were accounts that I read in my research where the horses actually saved the men's lives. They
Mm.
could feel if the the vibrations in the earth, if there was going to be a cave in, and they would try to get out of there quickly.
Yeah.
The men didn't know what was happening, but the horses knew.
Yeah.
And then there were other examples where the men risked their lives to save the horses.
Yeah.
So they became a team. And that's what I kind of stress in Coal Dust and Dreams, how she becomes a partner with her father's horse after her father gets injured and has to recuperate and is not able to support the family. Then, when you talk about paradoxes, I was thinking Coal Dust and Dreams, just the title is a paradox
Mm.
because you think how many people spent their entire lives in or around a coal mine, whether in the UK or in Canada or the US, wherever coal was available. And this particularly became intense after the Industrial Revolution when coal was in such demand.
Yeah.
But in any case, the many of those people never got out of that village. They lived there the rest their whole lives. They were born there, they lived there the rest of their lives. But this young girl and her parents had a different dream, and they weren't going to let the coal dust tarnish that dream. And so I thought how important it is for all of us to have dreams. It
Mm.
doesn't have to be as grandiose as she has, but it just needs to be a dream that helps us fulfill our purpose in life.
Yes.
Her dream is to become a veterinarian and care for the horses, and she does end up succeeding in that dream. Now, you and I have different dreams. I It took me one trip with a veterinarian to oversee a surgery on a horse to know that I didn't want to be a veterinarian anymore.
Totally. Yeah.
That was my dream went out. That dream went out the window. And then the dream to become an Olympic equestrian went out the window when I met my husband. And that's okay. Our
Mm.
dreams can change and we can still focus on becoming the kind of person we need to become.
Mm.
So we're in a process of becoming. That
Always.
that can be
Yeah.
our word, becoming.
I love that. I'm going to write that down. Becoming, always in a process of becoming. And I think the reminder that the dream can change.
Yeah,
The dream
dreams
can
can
change.
change. And that doesn't mean you failed.
No,
You
no,
just have a different a realization of what your purpose is supposed to be.
for sure. Yeah, something else I got in Coal Dust and Dreams, which I think is so powerful. And it's interesting because you were talking about dressage. I have a little bit of dressage background as well. And one of the things I remember learning, um, in sorry, I'm seeing some things out there. So This
That's
shouldn't be
okay.
happening, but someone else is gonna have to deal with it. Um, actually, hold on. I'm gonna pause this real quick and call this
Okay.
pup in. Hold on. This this is the troublemaker. This is Pearl.
Uh-huh.
And you shouldn't have been out like that because there was a car coming in. So I was like, I'm gonna have to do this right now. Gotta go grab the dog. Um, okay, where were we? Yes, I know. We were talking about dressage. And I
Mhm.
think what's so interesting about dressage is that it's all that physical communication, cues, touch, feel, and no voice commands.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was studying dressage and learning, wait, I can't use my voice at all. It was kind of at that place where I had been on horses where you could say canter and they would canter. And suddenly I lost that. And so what was interesting is I learned, the best riders are quiet riders and they're quiet here too, like children should be seen and not heard. And we lost that voice connection. So, what's really powerful in Coal Dust and Dreams, and what has been really powerful for me in my own riding education, is when I started learning how to drive a pony cart. And I learned that every horse who drives knows its name and then the command. Because back in the day, there would be lots of horses out. And if you just said ho, who's supposed to ho? Chester,
Oh,
ho.
oh.
But in your story and in the coal mines, when we're really working, there is actually this verbal exchange, this literal
They
conversation,
use voice commands.
and
They
it could
tell them
save
to
your life.
stop. They tell them to back up. They tell them to turn right or turn left using voice command.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting. Horses are so smart.
So smart and literally saved someone's life in the story. And the other
Right.
thing I thought that was powerful is at another point, a horse is stressed out and it's the sound of singing. And this is sort of a lifelong among trainers, I mean, there will be five opinions, there will be five different songs too, because we have different songs. I remember learning to get the beat of a canter, row, row, row your boat on a horse that wanted to go, row, row, row your boat really fast. And to learn to help her slow down by using your voice and that connection and then singing and singing to horses and letting them essentially share their song with us is like
Uh-huh.
so beautiful. Yeah. I I really loved how you portrayed that. Um, okay. One more thing I want to read, which is a review of your book, Coal Dust
Okay.
and Dreams by Diane Donovan from the Midwest Book Reviews. She says, and I'm just reading a snippet of it. She says, uh, that this, we could really write this off as being for horse crazy girls, but to limit to that audience would be to do a grave disservice. It's real world background history, social and cultural insights, and lessons on perseverance, problem solving, and confronting prejudice all give Coal Dust and Dreams a supercharged injection of value beyond the usual girl and horse tale. Margie, of course you got the award. I mean, this is so you, Margie. Like it's so beautiful and the collection of wisdom and stories you've pulled upon and history and just this like real heart connection with the pit ponies who are actually not really technically ponies either.
In South Wales, they're horses. In North Wales, they were ponies, however. And in the US, they were burros. They would use the coal seams in South Wales were much larger, so the tunnels were much larger, so they used a larger horse. In North Wales, they were smaller, so they had to use the ponies. But they were always called pit ponies. But and it's interesting. People are always asking me, well, where do you get your ideas for your books?
Mm,
And I say, often it's from my readers. They will send me ideas.
mm,
And sometimes I will look into, their idea and I'll get excited about it. And sometimes it just, isn't something that inspires me. Well, this one was actually sent to me from my daughter. She sent me a picture of the Penalta mine today, which was closed in the 1990s. And they've taken the area that had been the mine and made it a park. And she sent me a picture of a giant 200-meter long earthen sculpture of a running horse that is named Sultan. The people named it Sultan. Let me see. I can show it to you. It's in the back of the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's Sultan, and it's a giant, giant horse that you can actually hike the from his back of his hoof clear up to his muzzle. But the horse was in honor of those pit ponies. That's, as I said, most of them spent their entire lives underground. As the mines became more mechanized, the need for the horses gradually disappeared.
Mm,
And so the horses would be retired and brought back up and then sold or turned out to pasture, whatever the needs would be. But the horses suffered the same ailments that the people did.
yeah.
I don't sugarcoat the book. I mean, it was a tough job for man and horse, but they had the lung issues, they had hoof issues being in the moist.
Mm.
The mines were filled with rats. I mean, it was just a miserable
Oh.
place to be. And so when I autograph the books for people, I always say, be grateful.
Mm.
Be grateful for the life that you have. The challenges you have may seem big at the times, but read this book and probably
Yeah.
your life is really good compared
Yeah.
to what they went through.
Absolutely. Huge perspective. And actually, that was a question that I had, and I'm so glad you talked about Sultan because the book opens with the grandmother in 1995, reflecting on what's built and then sharing with her granddaughter, this is the story of where you came from and the Welsh ponies. And it's so beautifully done. You guys have got to read this. Okay, but let's talk just for a moment and then we'll wrap up here because I know that listeners have this question. They have this question for me when I'm saying, you got to bring the horses back. You got to bring them back into your hearts, back into your homes, back into your cities, because when they go away, you're going to lose this heart connection, this soul that's available. And I'm not saying they need to be ridden or driven, or just saying you need to be with them, just with proximity. This is beautiful. This is a vision. This is a toy. This does not have a real heartbeat, this model horse that I'm touching here. But this idea of how is that for the horses? Healthy as a horse, and then coal mining, we know a lot of those things now historically and how bad they were for humans and for horses. What are your thoughts about the health of a horse, especially when it comes to their healing capacity or just being present to humans today in 2025?
That's interesting. You talked about the health of the horse. Um, my veterinarian that I've had for same vet for 28 years,
Mm.
he came by to do spring shots and he was talking to Hardy. Hardy's the pony that I mentioned before. And Hardy is now 30 years old. I got Hardy when he was 2.
Oh,
And so I've had Hardy a long time. Hardy has never liked the veterinarian because the veterinarian gives him shots.
yeah.
Hardy does not like shots. So he sees Dr. McCall coming and he disappears.
Yeah.
Well, Hardy, Dr. McCall was talking about how good Hardy looks. He's 30 years old. I'm still teaching kids beginning riding lessons on him. And he's not doing all his jumping he used to do. He was the best jumper.
Oh,
Welsh ponies are awesome jumpers. But anyway, he is, not doing all that he used to do. But Dr. McCall says just keep him going because he's doing great. And he said, this is Dr. McCall speaking. He said, when I started with my veterinarian career, most of the time, the oldest we'd see a horse would be 18.
oh,
18. And he said, Now to see horses like Hardy is commonplace.
Yeah. Mm,
So we as humans and caregivers, and you talked about being a caregiver, are doing some things right.
mhm.
We've learned tooth care, hoof care. We've learned how to prevent things like colic if it's caught early. I mean, there's things we have learned over time that would have killed a horse years ago.
Yeah.
And so now we're having that advantage. But we are also learning things from horses that can help humans. For example, Colorado State Veterinary School has a cancer research center where they're researching cancer treatments on horses
Wow.
that can then be applied to humans.
Wow.
So we're benefiting one another
Yeah.
in terms of our health care. But I think there's, no question with my work with Path International that horses provide the healing that we need. Often it's just the spiritual
Yeah.
help to be with a horse. Now, let me say, not everybody's in a position like we are to be able to have horses with them. I mean, I know I am so blessed. I am one of a million people to get to do what I get to do.
Yeah.
If I were living in Manhattan in New York, unless I went to Central Park to go pat the carriage horses, which now people are trying to outlaw, which
Right.
doesn't make any sense. But anyway, they probably weren't exposed to horses at all,
Yeah.
would have the life opportunities to do so. So if you can't do a horse, get a dog. It's animals that God has sent to this earth to be our companions, be
Mm.
our helpmeets. And maybe it's a dog that can bring you that love and that healing. There's therapy dogs too.
Yeah.
So I,
I
I'm not a cat person, so I can't speak to cats, but I can certainly speak to dogs and horses.
Oh, Margie, I love it so much. And I'm glad you brought that up because that little pup who just popped in the door to grace us, I actually bred her. And I had this incredible epiphany breeding. It's sort of been like this thing that has come when and you touched on this earlier when we were talking about caretaking, when you care for an animal and their babies, when you support them through the birth of their babies, keeping their babies safe in those early days and then throughout their growth period, you develop this really deep bond. And I was thinking, okay, way back, we talk about domestication, we talk about breeding, and then people have all kinds of opinions, a lot more opinions, maybe even.
Right.
But if we really look at the spirit of it, that we're helping each other to keep the species alive and stay connected to one another into another day, another year, another chapter, we're protecting each other. We're serving each other. It's that highest purpose. I was really, that's been a huge awakening for me. And that's what we're doing with horses and what they've been doing with us for 5,000 years. And it could be a dog. It could be a dog that awakens your heart. It could be a cat. There are a lot of portals to that deep connection and deep healing available to us through animals. And I'm so grateful for your work and for these books and the history, but also the deep presence you bring into today. So thank you so
Thank you.
much. How can people find you? We'll put all these links in the show notes, but tell me
Well,
your website, all the things.
well, I'm, on Amazon. All my books are available on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. Libraries, some of them, if your library doesn't have them, they can get them. Um, but I have a website that you can see all of my books with little short synopsis of each of the books. And you can also see the numerous awards that they have won. I've been very honored to have the professionals like my work, but most importantly, to have the readers like my work. But my website is www.dancinghorsepress.com. And they can go there, visit, look at the books page, look at the about the author page. They can learn more about me there.
Oh, thank you so much, Margie, also known as MJ Evans, her pen
Uh-huh.
name, in case you're searching on
Yep.
Amazon,
Yep.
and
MJ
Dancing
Evans
Horse
on
Press.
Amazon.
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you so much. You're such a great writer. I was having so much fun
Oh,
reading Gold Dust and Dreams. I was
oh,
almost late for the interview.
I have to show you everybody this book. There it is.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's just this beautiful image of a child's face with her pony. You
Yep,
want to pick it
with
up.
her pit
It's so
pony.
good. With her pit pony. All right. God bless you, Margie. Thank
Thank
you,
you. I,
listeners.
I
Have a-
appreciate you inviting me to join you today.
Such a gift. Yeah, please come again and keep doing
Okay.
the work that you're doing.
Well, I'll have to come when Silver Charm gets out.
Oh, we would love that. We would love
People will
that.
find that a very interesting story.
Awesome. Thank you,
Nonfiction,
Margie.
though.
Yeah, yeah. That's so much of it is fiction, nonfiction. It's this
Uh,
real deep heart connection in
yeah.
both genres, right? All right.
Okay.
Thank you so much, everybody. Have a
Bye.
great day.
Thank
Bye.
you.